Hey, welcome back to the Locked On Cavs podcast. I'm Chris Manning. Evan is off today. It's his birthday on February 9th, so happy birthday to one Evan Damrell. So frankly, we've got, a very special guest, one of my favorite people. It's Danny Cunningham from WKYC and ESPN 850. We're going to talk about Caris LeVert a little bit more, talk about what the Cavs are like as we move forward. That's all coming up today on Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Before we get too deep into today's show, I want to thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available on all platforms, and that includes YouTube, where we are over 1,000. We want to get up to, let's say, 1,500 by the All-Star break. Why not help us do that? But joining us from Tampa, Florida, the Florida area. I was just in Tampa, and I'm thinking I wish I was back in Tampa, Florida. He's gotten the golf. He's living the life. He's such a mensch that he comes through. I text him, and he's like, I'm in Florida. And I'm like, Danny, don't worry about coming on. We'll book this again. And you're like, no, let's talk about Caris LeVert. I'd love to come on. Danny
Hell
Cunningham.
yeah.
What's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm great. There's nothing I'd rather do right now than talk about the Cavs adding Caris LeVert. I think it's such a heartwarming story that a former Cavs fan gets to come back and play for his favorite team.
Never has happened before. We've never seen, this in our entire life. We've never seen,
I can't even think of one guy that grew up a Cavs fan or even in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah.
That played for the team.
Never. But Danny,
it'd be a cool story though.
It'd be a cool story if they did that, and then they were from even from Akron and won a title, or their dad played for the team or something like that. That could be really cool. It'd be really cool. But Danny, with Caris LeVert in the fold now, he spoke to the media for the first time on Tuesday. Basically just him and JB both kind of talked around if he's going to start or not. I think that's kind of the big question going into Wednesday's game and kind of going forward of what his role is exactly going to be and how he's going to be deployed. I think him talking about his excitement to be here, being back with Jared Allen, who he played with in Brooklyn before, is interesting and fun. I think clearly a lot of anticipation about this move. But Dan, I want to go big picture with this and with where the Cavs are at now with Caris LeVert. Let's just assume this is the move at the deadline. Maybe they do something else small, but this is the ceiling raising move that we're going to see here. Fill in the blank. The Cleveland Cavaliers are the blank best team in the East right now.
I will say, and this is a tough question just because of how jumbled up the Eastern Conference is, I'll say the fourth best team in the East. Okay. I know Milwaukee has been up and down this year, and they kind of have the feel for me of a team that knows what it takes to win it all. And we've certainly seen that here in Cleveland in the second LeBron stint, and their foot's not on the gas in the regular season. They're still better. I can't say Brooklyn is better because Brooklyn never has everyone available at this point, and I can't expect them to, but I do think Philadelphia is better, and I'll say Miami is better as well. But I do think that the Cavaliers, if things play out how I think they should, the Cavaliers are a team that should have home court advantage in the first round of playoffs this year, Chris.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think if we look at the East, it is a jumble mess. I'm going to pull up the standings right now because I look at them every day and they change all the time. They are so jumbled in terms of who is where, who is what seed. The Cavs could,
Chris, I look at the standings every day too, and I don't even know if it's worth me looking every day because 30 minutes later, it feels like it's different.
Yeah. So if you're on YouTube, you're going to see this right now. But here's the top 10 of the East, which with the Bradley Beal news, with the Knicks being bad, with the Pacers kind of doing a reset, with Detroit and Orlando being bad, it feels like there are a clear 10 teams that matter now. And now it's just about jockeying for position and who's going to be in the plan and who's going to be not. Miami's at 1, Milwaukee's at 2, the Bulls are at 3. The Cavs are at 4th right now. They're a half a game above Philly at 5. The Raptors coming up strong at 4.5 back. They were much lower than this a couple weeks ago. Then Brooklyn, Boston, Charlotte, and Atlanta in that order make up the play-in tournament. I think 4th or 5th sounds about right to me because I think if there's two teams I feel like are probably the best two teams when it comes down to brass tacks in the playoffs, I think it's Miami and Milwaukee. I think it's just those two teams. I think Joel Embiid is playing at just such a ridiculous level that he's just been so good that if they make a move by Thursday, if whatever they can do, maybe there's a chance for them to be really good. the Bulls, like if they get healthy again, I think that team has like a lot of legitness to it, but it depends on Caruso and Lonzo Ball being healthy because like their defense has not looked the same since those two guys have been hurt. I think the Cavs should be a little bit considered better than Toronto right now. I don't know what to make of the Brooklyn Nets. Like they are just such a disaster on so many fronts.
They're the most talented team in the East, but it's not working.
We did an over under pod at the beginning of the year with Ben Axelrod, and I picked the over on them, and buddy, it has been a abject.
Has the under already cashed? What was the over set?
I don't. It was very high, and like as someone who's bad at betting, I should have just smashed the under on a team that had a guy in Kyrie Irving who can't play home games and can't play in Toronto if they were to play Toronto in the playoffs for whatever reason. Like at least his rules stand right now, and the James Harden thing.
A very realistic possibility. There's a world out there. I'm not saying it's the most likely thing, but there's a world out there where it's a 4-5 Brooklyn-Toronto playoff series. That could happen.
Yes, which would be crazy and fun. But this is where I think this leads to. I think if you're the Cavs, you are in the thick of this, right? And you have a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way, if not the easiest schedule in the entire NBA. Miami and Milwaukee could be teams that look at this and say, okay, we just want to be healthy. We have older guys. We need to be as healthy as possible come to the playoffs. Chicago is going to be incorporating guys back. They still have Levine and DeRozan, but they're going to be incorporating back these really key pieces as we go along here. And Philly could be resting Embiid at times, whatever. I think if you're the Cavs, I think you go all out for the highest seed you possibly can get. Regardless of regardless of where they fall in terms of how good we think they are, if they are the fourth best team, if they are the third best team, if they are the fifth or sixth best team, whatever it is. And I think these teams are very tight. And I have some questions about the Cavs in the playoffs that I maybe don't have about some of these other teams just because of the offensive functionality. If they can, their chances, Danny, I think with this LeVert trade are better to get to the second round. It's just better now. And two, if they can put their foot on the gas here, the last stretch of the season through the All-Star break and after, if this team can get, up to 2, or they can get up to, God forbid, 1, and then they can get the worst team coming out of the play-in, if they could get Charlotte or Boston, their chances of advancing are so significantly better. If today they played Philly in round 1, that is a bloodbath of a series. And all these series are going to be hard. I think the East is really good. Pretty much 1 to 10. I think all these teams have a lot to going for them. But you get up to 1, you have to feel good about home court advantage and theoretically a weaker team, assuming it's not like Brooklyn who suddenly figures it all out and it just escapes the play and goes on a run.
But even then, the Cavs, for whatever reason, have matched up with Brooklyn relatively well over the past 2 years. I don't necessarily understand it, and I don't think it would be sustainable over a 7-game series, but it's worth noting. But Chris, if this is a team that gets the 1 seed, it's not inconceivable that they're in the conference finals.
No, not at all.
I still don't buy them as a team that can legitimately win the title, even with the addition of Caris LeVert. But this is a team that they should win a playoff series depending on the matchup. Now, there are certain matchups that are better than others, but say they draw the Hawks in the first round. That's a team that I think that the Cavs should beat in the playoffs right now. Mm-hmm. And it's so much fun to think about. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so excited to see Caris LeVert on the floor, because he does raise that ceiling. I think he raises the floor of this team too, which is something that, everyone gets so excited talking about the ceiling of teams. Oh, are they a conference finals team? Is there a world in which they win the East? Are they going to get out of the first round? But now I feel like that floor is, they're not going to be eliminated in the first round in less than 6 games. No matter who they play, they're at least winning 2 playoff games this year, at least. I would be moderately surprised if they didn't win the first round series. And of course, this depends on matchups because basketball is so matchup dependent, and especially in the Eastern Conference this year. But I do think LeVert raises that floor. It's not as fun to talk about, but I do think that just raising the floor alone gives such a better chance at success for this team. And that's one of the things I'm most excited about with them.
Yeah, and I think they're more functional now. They are just they have now that obviously it hasn't been this way since Rubio went down. They miss Colin Sexton as well. Those we can sit here and look at this and say this is the reality of the team. But I think it is worth noting that in the context of the season, 2 of the biggest things that happened were Colin Sexton getting hurt and Ricky Rubio getting hurt. And that, I don't think Kobe Altman, maybe they still look to make a trade for someone like Caris LeVert at the deadline. I don't think these 2 things are 100% related. But what I do think is that if you had told Kobe Altman before the beginning of the year that he would be missing these two guys that the offense is going to run through to some degree. Like, I think he would have been like, you're out of your mind. There's no way we're going to have to do with both those guys being hurt. And yet it's happened. And it is what it is. All right. After the break,
and then you tell him that they're 33-21, despite that happening. No one would, I would not have believed that. I mean, the fact that this team lost Colin Sexton, I think 11 games into the season, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't play more than 15. I know.
Yeah.
But the fact that they lost him that early, and Ricky Rubio in stretches played like an MVP candidate early on. Obviously, that didn't sustain.
But even like
then losing him and Garland for stretches, Kevin Love missed 2 weeks, and Kevin Love's been better than anyone could have ever dreamed.
Markkanen,
Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley missed a week and a half. This team hasn't been whole, and they've still found a way.
Yeah. And it's worth noting, I mentioned this on Tuesday's show, but their offensive numbers with post Rubio's injury have actually been like it doesn't look as good. It doesn't function as well. So I think they are worse off, but the numbers would tell you that the offense has stayed actually pretty even from what Rubio was. And that is because Darius Garland is an MF and superstar. And like that dude is a deserving all-star.
So good.
Yes. All right. After the break, we're going to get into a little bit more about Caris LeVert and what, just some of the little tidbits on what the Cavs' identity is now. But first, got to tell everyone about PrizePicks. Look, NBA fans, are you looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA? Then you need to try the award-winning PrizePicks app. You can get that on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. It is daily fantasy made easy. We know you're going to love it. All you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players and an over/under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times in any entry, and it's just you versus those projected numbers. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. They allow mixed sports entries, and it doesn't just offer NBA. They have options for college basketball, college football, NFL, MLB, soccer, MMA, and more. For a limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer offer for all users. Users get $50 free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. But to get that offer, you have to use the code NBA. That is right. This is an exclusive offer available to Locked On listeners. Sign up today. Use the code NBA for $50 free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point. By the way, that we do have the NBA trade deadline obviously coming up this week. The Cavs have been active, but Locked On is doing a live show on Thursday. Tons of great people around the network will be talking about all the big moves that happened before and on that day. Subscribe to the Locked On NBA YouTube channel and check it out there. All right, Danny, I want to pivot to this question. Is this, we've sort of talked about this, that this team is built better now for the playoffs. But I think a different way of asking about this that I think is to me more insightful to think about is, what is the Cavs' identity now? And is with Caris LeVert, is it meaningfully different? Has bringing in LeVert, at least on the offensive end, I think we know the defensive end is what it is built around those two guys at the back. But is the offensive identity now possibly at least meaningfully different because Caris LeVert is on the Cleveland Cavaliers?
I do think so, Chris, because now I don't expect the offense to fall off a cliff when Darius Garland is on the bench. And I do think it's important, and we'll see how JB Bickerstaff plays this when the Cavs are back in action later tonight against the Spurs. And, after the All-Star break more, so I think we'll have a better feel. But I think it'd be pretty wise I expect both LeVert and Garland to be starters, but I also think it'd be pretty wise to stagger their minutes in the second and third quarters of games just to try and keep that offense afloat as best you can, because it's going to be nice having them on the floor at the same time, because the Cavs really don't have anyone other than Garland that can effectively run a pick and roll. Caris LeVert's going to be able to do that, and that's something that this team's not had since Ricky Rubio came down. And the other thing I'm really interested in, I've brought this up a couple times on my nightly show on ESPN Cleveland, but Rajon Rondo is kind of overcast right now at this point in his career as a second point guard. But having Caris LeVert, who is very much not a point guard, can kind of push back Rondo to like your second and a half point guard. And he's still a little overcast in that role, but I also think that small difference might help him out a lot too.
I agree. I think that there will be a shift here, right? Like, it will be more pick and roll. It will be more of him getting to the rim. It will be Darius Garland moving off the ball. I think one of the biggest keys to all of this will be, how does Darius Garland, who I think can be an effective off-ball player, has obviously done that more in years past than this year, and has certainly put the ball in his hands more than ever before, especially post Rubio. But if Garland can, come off some screens and take some threes that way to space the floor, if he can get run around some screens to do some cutting to the rim and kind of be used in that way to kind of keep things scrambled in some way. I think, Danny, one of my biggest concerns about Cleveland is like, I think the offense gets very stale. I think the offense gets very stationary. It gets a lot of Darius Garland's running a high pick and roll with Jared Allen, and three guys, including Evan Mobley, are standing around. Or, there's one action with like Kevin Love's at the elbow and Jetty Osmond's cutting around him, but the three other guys on the floor are standing there. I don't necessarily think LeVert is changing that DNA. I think that DNA is a JB Bickerstaff thing, looking at this personnel and saying, this is how I want to play. And him being a more conservative offensive coach, I think is how you get there. But I think LeVert will create some different wrinkles. It's like a reason I think they miss Lauri Markkanen is like Markkanen not only is spacing the floor, but he is a guy that they will run off of screens and have him roll to the rim to just get him easy looks that way and try to use his size to their advantage. What they've decided to do, I think, with this offense is say, we're going to take these guys that we have and we're going to take what they do and we're going to try to push exactly what they do really well to an extreme degree. It is not always going to be pretty. It is not always going to be like necessarily like making things easier for everybody, but it is like been at least league average in a way that I don't necessarily know if I would have thought this offense would have been league average, right? Like Mobley,
I would not have.
Yeah, Mobley has certainly been better at offense than we thought. Allen's had, I think, a growth here on that end of the floor, and Garland has been crazy. But if LeVert can come in and like they can have moments where like he is running pick and roll with Kevin Love, he's running pick and pop with Kevin Love, he is. I think him and Allen and Love should be like, and Jetty should be like the core of bench units. And then you're looking for that fifth guy to play with them. I think there's a lot of room to just grease the wheels of the offense a little bit, even if it doesn't result in something that is as modern or as like sleek as you maybe would like. It should progress. Like, I think if LeVert is going to have an impact, you're going to see the offense. It's not maybe going to happen by the deadline, but it will progress in a way that is noticeable, I think, over the next like month or two.
Well, and I think it's worth noting that this is going to take time, right? Like, when you tune into the game tonight against San Antonio, don't expect them to suddenly look like the 2016 Warriors. Like that's not going to be the case. But I do expect by the time playoff basketball rolls around, which now I think it's all but a certainty the Cavs are going to be in the playoffs. They're going to.
There's no model that has them as like a not like it's like five, like some of them have them like under 1%. I'm gonna look up the 538 one right now that had the Cavs like under 1% at the beginning of the year, but like there's not a realistic world barring like something catastrophic happening that this team like isn't in the playoffs.
But by that point, I do expect the offense to look much better and have less of a lull period when Garland isn't on the floor. And hopefully, because you brought up this standing around by, Garland running a pick and roll with Jarrett Allen or somebody else, and there's three guys standing around. That's been a big problem for me at the end of games where we've seen execution, especially when Garland's been out dealing with his back injury lately. We've seen that rear its ugly head. And that's been my biggest cause for concern other than a couple of slow starts, like getting outscored 27-12 in the first quarter against the Pacers the other night was inexcusable. But that is something that needs to change, is the end of game execution and having another ball handler out there in Caris LeVert. And I'm not trying to confuse him with Kyrie Irving here, but having someone else that can run an offense competently takes a ton of pressure off Darius Garland. And in turns, it's just going to make everything else smoother for the Cavs, and buckets are going to be easier to find than they have been.
Here's just a number to put this in context. This is from Cleaning the Glass. With Darius Garland on the floor, the Cavs have an offensive rating. Overall, they're on average as a team. This includes minutes with Garland on the floor, minutes with him off the floor, everything. They have scoring 110.2 points per possession. That's a little bit below league average in terms of lineups. With him off the floor, they're scoring 106 per 100 possessions. That is very bad in modern NBA. That is
near the bottom of the NBA.
Yes. With him on the floor, they're up to with him on the floor, and then fact like versus minutes, just with him on the floor, they're 112.9. So basically, they are like not necessarily good with him. They are like a little above average with him on the floor offensively because he's dragging them there to some degree. They are like overall like a little below average. And without him on the floor, they're like really, really putrid on offense. And I think if Caris LeVert shores that gap up a little bit, that like this is not going to be like as drastic as, let's say, it's not quite as dramatic or as drastic as like, you remember like the last LeBron year when it's like they couldn't like do, like, even with Kyrie, even those last couple of years, you couldn't do anything when he wasn't on the floor. Like the numbers were just like, these teams are useless. It is not that, but like there is this chasm where like Darius Garland plays 32 minutes tonight or whatever, and it's like those 60 minutes are in the wilderness when he's not on the floor for the offense. And if like LeVert shores those up, it's a win.
And it doesn't even have to be a major difference. If Caris LeVert can help pull the offense without Darius Garland on the floor from putrid to slightly below average, that's a huge win. Mm-hmm. I don't even think we're asking for average offense without Garland. We're just saying don't be the worst in the league, basically.
Yes. Yeah. You're asking to not like have no like traction. You're asking them to just
don't be the 2019 Cavs.
But and I think you're also just to like in a non like don't know who needs to watch that again. You're also like asking, I think, the team not to be relying on like Kevin Love and Cedi Osman going off like they did the other night. Like those guys have been great this year. Kevin in particular has been incredible. Like I think like having to rely on those guys to play like 30 minutes a night and keep doing that over and over again is asking a little much of what they can be. And if this takes some pressure off of those guys as well, and like maybe like Markin and him will develop chemistry. Maybe Allen, can kind of his efficiencies dipped like just a tid. Maybe that ramps up now that he's going to play with another ball handler that he frankly hasn't got to play with since Ruby went down. These are all like plausible things that I think make this, even if like you have defensive concerns, even if I think the health concerns with LeVert are fair, even if like the contractual stuff going forward will be really, really interesting to see how it plays out. For this season, in this immediate term of us thinking about right now, they're a better basketball team with him. And I don't really think, I just don't think that's particularly debatable. Okay.
I don't see the downside for this year. Yeah. I can understand downsides for the future, and it creates some questions contractually, as you mentioned. But the Cleveland Cavaliers, the 2021-22 Cleveland Cavaliers are a better basketball team with Caris LeVert.
Yes. All right. After the break, we're going to get into what we want to see in game one from Caris LeVert, who, if you haven't seen already, will be wearing number 3 for the Cleveland Cavaliers. But first, got to tell everyone about our friends at Built Bar. Look, it's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. That means if yours is about getting fit, maybe check out Built Bars. Built Bars are the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. They make it easy to stick to resolution, get that protein in your diet because they taste so good, you're going to want to eat it, unlike those chalky, waxy, or taste like a chemical spill protein bars. Danny, as a former athlete at a higher level than me, who's just like a bad high school football player, how many bad protein bars have you eaten in your life?
All of them.
Yeah. Look, next time I see you, I'm going to slide you a Built Bar because they're like actually.
I've never had a Built Bar. In
fairness. Are you a cookie dough guy? Do you like cookie dough flavored things?
Cookie dough's okay. I'm more of a cookies and cream, plain chocolate, peanut butter.
Oh, okay. I got you.
And I know Built Bar's got a ton of tremendous flavors, but unfortunately, cookie dough is not near the top of my list.
I'm gonna bring you some as a little gift package for coming in and stepping in. There's a ton of great flavors. You mentioned them: peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, mint brownie. There's a ton of great ones. Next time I see you at a Cavs game, I'm gonna hand you a little package of Built Bars. It's gonna be fun.
I can't wait.
It's gonna be a vibe. Anyway, check out Built Bar today. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off of Built.com and go stock up on some protein bars. All right, Danny, Cavs Spurs, 7 p.m. Their last home game, I believe, before the All-Star break because they go on a little road trip here. I think there's two quick ways to look at this of what you'd want to see from him in game one. Number one, do we think he starts? I think the answer is yes. And number two, what would be like, what are you looking for as he plays his first game? And with the caveat that I think everyone rightfully should assume that this will, like game one will be ideally not the peak of what he's going to provide.
Yeah, game one's not going to be peak. I do think he starts. I'm interested what the starting lineup is in the future more so than tonight. Just with Markin and out, I think it's pretty easy to slide LeVert into that 3. And you're a little undersized right now in doing so, but
yes,
a starting 5 of Allen, Mobley, LeVert, Isaac Okoro, and then Darius Garland is questionable tonight. Now, by the time you're listening to this, we might have some clarity on his status, but obviously he would slide into that starting lineup if he could play. So that would be a great starting 5 for tonight if possible. And, it was said yesterday at media availability about JB just wants Caris LeVert to be himself. Mm-hmm. I just want to see how he's able to, one, look on the floor with Jarrett Allen, because that's the one guy on this roster that he's got a ton of experience with. They played for 3.5 seasons together in Brooklyn before they were both sent away in the James Harden trade. I've been calling it the Jarrett Allen trade because the Cavs, quite frankly, won that trade, which is crazy to say, but they did. And I'm excited to see that chemistry reunited. And just if Garland does play, I'm really interested to see the rotations that JB Bickerstaff puts out. I'm assuming Garland would be on some sort of minutes restriction, which is very understandable coming off that back injury. But I'd like to see what the offense looks like, even in small doses, without high expectations, when Garland is on the bench and Caris LeVert is running the second unit per se.
Yeah, I want to see, particularly, I think, what he looks like in terms of who he's playing with and what the JB's first inclination is going to be to who he plays with, right? Like, because my guess would be, let's just assume that Garland plays as well. My kind of assumption is that like LeVert will start and then come out for like pick your Kevin Love, Jetty Osman, whomever that's going to be, right? Like it's going to be one of those kind of guys. And then I want to see like when he comes back, and I just kind of assume it will be for Garland because I can't my assumption my guess would be the first thing you do with LeVert is play him with Kevin Love and you play him with Jared Allen, and I think he then like squeezes Rondo's minutes. I think he squeezes any potential Brandon Goodwin minutes. It's notable that Brandon Goodwin, we're recording this while the game is on, so no updates, but Brandon Goodwin was playing in for the Cleveland Charge on Tuesday night. So like that would make you think that he's maybe not going to be planned on playing on Wednesday night, all things considered. I think like the read is okay. Then they want to see like how he extends out the rotation and like who he decides to match him with. I would like to see him play with Mobley as well, just because I think there's some stuff you could do that could be interesting. But I also, it just seems like such an odd, it just seems like such a clear fit to me to play Allen, Love, and LeVert together. And then, but really, I think the pairing that is almost probably the most important of those is maybe LeVert, Love, because if those guys can, any lineups of those two guys, generally speaking, with like Jetty is probably the third guy just based on what we've seen. If those lineups can like be good offensively, that is that is such a win for this team in terms of where they're going to be. And that I want to see if they have some organic two-man chemistry, that would be a big deal. If they can run some pick and pop, if they can find a rhythm right away and just kind of see what that looks like. I'm going to be zeroing in on that, I think, for night one.
Let me throw a lineup at you. How comfortable would you be with Allen, Love, Osman, Okoro, and LeVert on the floor together?
Repeat that back to me one more time.
Allen, Love, Chetty, LeVert, and Okoro.
I like that because I think it's like every Cavs lineup. I think the spacing is like a little tight. Right, like I think even like LeVert is a sub shooter, like he's not a plus 3-point shooter. I think that's obviously going to remain a problem for them as we kind of go forward here. I think the thing here is that lineup is big. Number one, like Okoro can go play point of attack defense. Allen can defend the back line, and like you have your sort of structure of your defense, like not at its full capacity, but like you have the structure in place. Osman can provide some secondary creation, as can Kevin Love alongside LeVert. So LeVert's not having to do everything. It is perhaps like a little light on guys that are going to make like the simple read. Like there's a lot of you're hoping that a lot of ball movement, a lot of just kind of I think successful actions via screens, via just some two-man game. I think kind of irons out some of the lack of like a Darius Garland level creator. Like I think that like is something they will feel in any of those lineups. But there's also lineups like I would like to see Isaac Okoro get to like have the ball in his hands for a little bits of those lineups, just to give him those reps in those moments. I think that could be a good opportunity for him to get to do that stuff. It's because like as much as Okoro is like a limited offensive player, and we should look at him as a guy that's probably going to stand in the corner a lot, and like you hope he makes the 3-4 threes he gets a game there. Like I want to see him push. Like I think that is good for his development. I think that would be good for just them understanding what you have with him alongside these guys, and like just and like again, like I don't think him standing in the corner is like helping him. You know what I mean? Like I don't think him standing there waiting for the ball to get swung to him and either takes a three or makes an extra pass back out to Jetty or something is like particularly helpful to him or helpful to the team. So there's some questions that I think about how that would look. I think that's a lineup that I like on paper, but I think that could take a couple games to get into a rhythm. I think that could take a couple games for those guys to get comfortable with each other. And I think for LeVert I'm fascinated to see what LeVert and Jetty look like, because like that could be either like kind of good because they're kind of a little opposite in some ways, but it also could be like buddy, I don't know how we manage these.
Yeah, it could be we can't do this anymore.
Yeah, which is if that's the case, that's a problem. That's a problem if that's the case. Like Josh, if you had like Josh Hart instead of Jetty, that's like much just because Hart's a sturdier defender and like still can shoot. Like even if you lose a little bit of the like Jetty's ability to just like kind of go off every once in a while because Hart's not really that guy. Like you're probably a little more
not
stable.
getting a fourth quarter. You're not getting a fourth quarter from Josh Hart like you got from Chetty Osman against the Pacers. That's just not happening.
No, and you shouldn't like bank on Jetty doing that anyway. But like it's at least like him and LeVert are the only two guys on the team aside from Garland who I think have that ball in their hands like erupt kind of capacity.
Yeah,
Danny, I want to end on this. As far as the defense goes, I think defensively they'll be okay with LeVert. But do you have a feeling on what you would like to see as far as once Markkanen is back? Just keeping the defense at the level that has driven the success this year, does that come into play in terms of how you think about a potential starting five once Markkanen is back? Is it more about like what the offense looks like? Like what do you will decide what the starting five should be once Markkanen is back from injury, whenever that is? We should note that JB Bickerstaff said he was a participant in practice on Tuesday, but he's listed as out on Wednesday, and that is a very vague way of saying he probably didn't do very much, but he's around.
He was at practice.
He was in Independence.
What's that saying? Yes, he was.
Yes, he was in Independence
courts on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I do think the starting lineup, when all is well, is going to be Allen, Mobley, Markkanen, LeVert, Garland. I think that's going to be your starting five. The defense is probably going to take a slight drop because they don't have that strong point of attack defender. And I also expect Caris LeVert to be a much better defender in Cleveland than he was in Indianapolis. I don't think he's going to be the same level of defender Isaac Okoro is, and I'm not certainly trying to confuse. No one's going to confuse him with Scottie Pippen defending on the perimeter, but he's not going to be atrocious. I think that the level of effort he's going to put forth on that side of the floor is going to be raised. I think that because he's playing for something that matters now. In Indianapolis, kind of playing for draft picks at this point. Like he was very much ready to get out of there. There were reports that he and Rick Carlisle didn't exactly see eye to eye on a lot of things. And I think that this change of scenery will help him on the defensive end of the floor. And also, anytime that you have Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley on the floor together, I do think you're going to have a good defense. Losing the point of attack defender in Okoro from that starting group is going to hurt. But I think that what LeVert brings offensively will more than make up for that.
I agree. I think what will be worth watching is, let's just say Markkanen doesn't play before the All-Star break, and Okoro gets this handful of games with this new starting lineup to kind of see how it works. I would wonder like what. I don't even know if I have like a level of success. Like I wouldn't go off of wins and losses. I think that's like a flawed way of approaching this. I don't know what like I would need.
Too many variables inside that.
Yeah, it's like quarterback wins aren't a stat. Pitching wins are kind of like a weird like it's just the wins and losses can be kind of a weird stat unless you want to just ride with vibes.
Well, I mean, vibes are great.
Vibes. We talked about vibes for a good cooking. It's important. I wonder like what kind of like what he would want to see on film and what he would want to see in the numbers, like and how those two things merge and what he thinks of Okoro as the fifth starter instead of Markkanen over these next couple games. Because I feel like if Okoro, there is a level of play Okoro could get where like you think, okay, like this point of attack thing matters. Rim protection starts 30 feet out. Yes, we have these two guys, but this will can LeVert and Garland make those function enough, and can Okoro do enough where like those lineups work enough to you to bring Markkanen off the bench? I don't necessarily know if that's true, because I also it becomes harder to split Love and Markkanen if
neither one of them starts.
You're right. It just becomes a trickier thing to manage. Like it's almost like
it's
hard.
I also wonder if this is at all matchup dependent. Like, is Markkanen versus Okoro starting a matchup dependent thing, or does JB value consistency? There are some coaches out there, and I certainly understand this line of thinking, that they want to have the same starting five every single night. And I get that. And I might even agree with that, but not everyone thinks that way. And I'll be very curious to see how JB does think.
Yeah, I could go either way on that, because I think like the Cavs defensive scheme this year has really been like, okay, like even if Larry Markkanen's chasing around Kevin Durant for a minute, we're gonna switch everything. So like Jared Allen and Evan Mobley are gonna take that on. So it's like you've kept that consistency. But if you get into the playoffs and it's game 7 and you're playing a team that's playing smaller, like if you're playing Philly, let's say you play Philly in round 1, like, and they're playing a little bigger, like do you like let's for instance on Tuesday they started the starting 5 of Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, Maxey, Curry, and Thibault. That's 3 wings. You want to put Okoro out there just to kind of match some of that smallerness a little bit better. Or if you're playing Toronto, do you want to, and they don't really play centers in their starting lineup, do you want to like put another wing out there to have Okoro chase those guys around instead of asking Markkanen to do all of that? Like there are some fair questions that we could see in the playoffs, but it's like very fun that we're talking about potential playoff coaching adjustments at the end of a podcast in February.
It's amazing. Yes.
This is how far we've come with it. It's kind of wild.
And
Danny,
Chris, I did not expect this at all. I did not expect us to be having this conversation on February 8th about the Cavs this year.
I don't think anyone expected it. I don't think the team expected it. If anyone believes, if anyone like has like proof that they like bet on this to some degree or like whatever, we'll shout it out on the show next week or something. But like, I just don't think this is like the upper 1% of like outcomes. And it feels real too is the thing. Like it feels
sustainable.
Yeah. It feels like this isn't just like a one-off kind of thing. It feels like this is going somewhere, and in part because Evan Mobley and Darius Garland are super duper stars. They're superstars. And Jared Allen's also very, very good. It's fun times. Danny, before we go, tell everyone where they can find you and where they can support your work.
I'm on Twitter at RealDCunningham, and I write for WKYC, and I also talk on the radio on 8:50 a.m. every day from 5 to 7, myself with Matt Fontana. It's on ECT right there on 8:50 ESPN Cleveland.
Danny's workout. Again, we'll be back tomorrow after the Cavs play the Spurs. We'll dive deep into Evan and I, assuming Evan's, not whatever he's doing on his birthday. Hopefully he's up for a podcast, but we'll dive into the Caris LeVert debut, and we'll be back. This has been Chris. Thanks again to Danny for coming on. It's been Locked On Cavs. Everyone be well, stay safe, stay warm, and enjoy the Caris LeVert debut.